let's talk about taxation. Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and honorable judges. Our recently instituted federal carbon tax is what is known as a purposed tax. A purpose tax is exactly what it sounds like, a tax which is brought into effect with a specific end in mind. There are two ways in which this works. Firstly, by deterring people from purchasing a product. An example of this is heavily taxing cigarettes, which has caused many people to stop smoking. The second way is by using the revenue from the tax itself to deal with a problem at its root. We are told that the carbon tax is meant only as a tool for improving the environment. If this were the case, we would expect that the revenue from the tax would be used to fund innovations in alternative fuel. The major problem is, however, that no matter how much farmers are taxed, the same amount of food is required to feed our population. Farmers will not stop fueling up their tractors because gas prices go up. That leaves us then with using the money from the tax itself to try and deal with the problem once and for all. The following are a list of advancements and innovations which are being funded using the carbon tax. That's right, there are none. So we can clearly see that the carbon tax clearly stands little chance of actually reducing carbon emissions. Although it is the most recent, the carbon tax is not the only federal tax in Canada which was brought into effect with a specific purpose. As you may or may not know, our federal income tax, introduced in 1917, was actually meant as a temporary measure to fund the war effort in World War I. In fact, when then Finance Minister Sir Thomas White tabled the bill, he clearly related it to the war. As quoted by an article on the Financial Post, the enactment of the Military Service Bill, which has just passed through the House, will result in material increase in and acceleration of the war expenditures of the Dominion. In view of these expenditures, and in order to maintain the credit of the Dominion, it is necessary that we should adopt further taxation measures, unquote. So here we have an example of a tax which was instituted for a very specific purpose, that is, assisting in the war. The thing is, however, that the money from the tax goes into the General Revenue Fund and was carried on far, far beyond the war for which it was actually intended, and now will never go away. To put it bluntly, our government is broke. Canada's national debt is now well over $1 trillion, and far from improving, it is spiraling more and more out of control. Canada is an export country, and specifically an exporter of oil and gas products. This means that the majority of money we get from other countries comes as a direct result of selling our fossil fuels. When, as our government is currently attempting to do, we squash our oil industry, we effectively squash our international trade, and our economy becomes a closed system. When our governments cannot get income from other countries, the only alternative is taxation of citizens. So we have a strange situation. On one hand, we have a new tax, the carbon tax, which so far seems to have zero potential to actually reduce carbon emissions. On the other hand, we have a government whose reckless spending has created a situation in which the only income is through taxing the people. In these circumstances, it is difficult to take seriously any purpose tax which is brought in. However, setting aside all ecological implications of how the carbon tax is supposed to work, the tax itself is only too representative of the awful state of our federal economy. Here in Alberta, we are at the center of this issue. It is our oil and gas which creates and sustains the Canadian economy. Because Alberta is so involved in fossil fuels, a carbon tax will certainly hit us harder than other areas of Canada. Alberta's family farms specifically will suffer from this tax. As I said before, there is no plan currently under consideration to stop people from eating. With the same demand and a higher cost of production for farmers, one of two things will inevitably happen. Either small farmers will go out of business and huge international non-Canadian mega farms will take their place, or farmers will have to increase their prices in order to survive, and these higher prices will be passed on to consumers in grocery stores. Obviously, both of these outcomes are highly detrimental, both to the farmers and to the consumers on the other end. The carbon tax, ever since it was first introduced by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has created a multitude of opinions, discussions, arguments, and even outright fights. Those in favor of it point to the ways in which it will supposedly preserve Canada's environment for future generations. We find, however, that in analyzing these laws and bringing them to their natural conclusions, it becomes clear that not only does the carbon tax currently have no effect on carbon emissions, it has very little potential to ever do so in the future. What this tax does do, however, is show evidence of a collapsing economy, provide a strong foundation for inflation and increased product expenses, and endanger the family farms which Canada was founded on.